The evening air was cool and crisp, the kind of weather that made Rachel Summers grateful for her long, woolen coat. She stepped out of her car and gazed at the entrance of the Meridian, an elegant fine dining establishment renowned for its exclusivity and top-tier cuisine. Tonight was supposed to be a promising opportunity, a networking dinner with a potential client who could bring significant projects to her thriving architecture firm. Rachel adjusted her scarf, her reflection caught in the sleek glass of the restaurant's entrance. Her caramel complexion and tight curls framed a face that was calm but determined. She was used to walking into rooms where she was the only black person. She had long since learned how to carry herself with confidence, no matter the setting. The hostess at the stand smiled briefly as Rachel approached. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, Rachel Summers, 7 p.m., she replied. The hostess tapped at her screen, her brow furrowing. "I'm not seeing your name here." Rachel blinked, pulling up the confirmation email on her phone. "It's right here. I made the reservation 2 weeks ago." The hostess glanced at the screen, hesitating. "Let me check with the manager." She disappeared into the dining area, leaving Rachel standing at the podium. Rachel's gaze wandered as she waited. Inside, the restaurant exuded understated luxury, gleaming chandeliers, dark wood panels, and tables draped in white linens. Patrons in evening attire laughed softly over glasses of wine. A couple walked in behind Rachel, their smiles wide as they handed the hostess their names. Within moments, they were escorted to a table near the expansive front windows, a prime spot with a view of the city lights. Rachel frowned. That couple hadn't mentioned a reservation. The hostess returned moments later, now accompanied by a tall man in a tailored suit. His dark hair was slicked back, and his expression was one of detached professionalism. "Good evening. I'm Grant Donovan, the manager. Is there a problem?" Rachel stepped forward. "Yes, it seems there's been a mistake with my reservation. I booked a table for 7 p.m., and I have the confirmation right here." She held up her phone. Grant glanced at her screen briefly before shrugging. "I see the issue. Unfortunately, we're at full capacity tonight. We'll have to seat you in one of our secondary areas. Follow me, please." "Secondary areas?" Rachel's stomach sank. "Wait, I don't understand. If I made a reservation, why am I not being seated at one of your regular tables?" Grant's smile was tight and practiced. "We prioritize seating based on party size and reservation details. Your table is ready. It's just in a less central location." He gestured toward a narrow hallway leading to a small, dimly lit section near the kitchen. The tables there were visibly smaller and crammed together, a far cry from the spacious, elegant dining room. Rachel's eyes narrowed. "That doesn't seem consistent with how you're treating other guests." Grant's polite tone hardened slightly. "Miss Summers, I assure you this is standard practice. We are accommodating your reservation as best as possible." Rachel felt the eyes of other diners flicker toward her, sensing the quiet tension building. She took a calming breath and followed him to the table. The clinking of silverware and murmured conversations from the main dining area faded as they approached the cramped corner. Grant pulled out a chair and motioned for her to sit. "Enjoy your meal." She sat reluctantly, her jaw tight as he walked away. Rachel couldn't help but notice the contrast between her table and those in the main dining area. While those diners sipped wine under the soft glow of chandeliers, she sat beneath a fluorescent light that flickered faintly. This wasn't about logistics. It was about something else entirely. Rachel scanned the menu, though her appetite waned. She glanced toward the entrance, where another group of white patrons arrived without reservations. She watched as they were led to a beautifully set table near the windows, another prime spot. Her heart sank, replaced quickly by a wave of indignation. The waiter approached, his demeanor polite but rushed. "Can I get you started with something to drink?" Rachel hesitated, then smiled tightly. "Just water, thank you." The waiter nodded and left, and Rachel took out her phone. She didn't want to make a scene, but this felt too familiar. The subtle dismissal, the unspoken message that she didn't belong here. She opened her email and began typing a draft addressed to the restaurant's owner. Moments later, Grant returned, pausing at her table. "Is everything to your satisfaction, Miss Summers?" Rachel looked up, her tone measured. "Actually, no. It seems odd to me that several parties who arrived after me, without reservations, were seated in better sections. Grant's smile faltered, but his response was clipped. We strive to maintain a certain ambience for all our guests. Sometimes that means making adjustments. Rachel raised an eyebrow. And by ambience, you mean what exactly? Grant straightened his tie, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. I simply meant that we cater to a specific clientele. If that's a concern, I'd be happy to comp your meal tonight as a courtesy. Rachel's jaw tightened. There it was, the thinly veiled dismissal disguised as politeness. No need, she replied coolly. I'll pay for my meal. But I'll also be speaking to your owner about this ambience issue. Grant's expression froze for a moment, then morphed back into professional indifference. Of course. Please enjoy your evening. Rachel's meal arrived, and while the food was exquisite, the bitter taste of injustice lingered. She ate slowly, using the time to observe the room. When she finished, she left a tip for the waiter, gathered her belongings, and walked past the main dining area. She didn't bother masking her disappointment as she exited. Standing on the sidewalk outside, Rachel gazed back at the Meridian. The elegant facade now seemed like a thin veneer hiding something rotten beneath. She pulled out her phone and snapped a photo of the restaurant, attaching it to her draft email. Subject: a disappointing experience at the Meridian. Message: Dear Evelyn Hart, my name is Rachel Summers, and I dined at your establishment tonight. While your food and ambience are excellent, I feel compelled to bring an issue to your attention. Rachel hit send, her finger hovering over the button momentarily. Let's see if they're willing to listen, she murmured to herself. As she walked back to her car, the cool air invigorated her resolve. This wasn't just about her. It was about standing up for anyone who had ever been made to feel less than in a place they had every right to be. And Rachel wasn't about to let it go. The soft glow of morning sunlight filtered through Rachel's apartment windows as she sat at her desk, coffee in hand. Her laptop screen displayed an email confirmation. Her message to Evelyn Hart, owner of the Meridian, had been delivered successfully. She had spent the previous night replaying the evening's events in her mind, each detail sharpening her sense of purpose. It wasn't the first time Rachel had encountered subtle discrimination, but something about this incident felt different. Maybe it was the audacity of Grant Donovan's dismissal or the knowledge that so many others likely had similar stories. Either way, Rachel felt a fire within her, quiet but steady. Determined to take action, she picked up her phone and called Caleb Monroe, her longtime friend and a civil rights attorney. Caleb had a reputation for being sharp, empathetic, and relentless in his pursuit of justice. Rachel, Caleb greeted warmly. To what do I owe the pleasure so early? I need your advice, she said, launching into a detailed account of what had happened at the Meridian. When she finished, Caleb was silent for a moment. You're sure this wasn't an isolated incident? Positive, Rachel replied firmly. I've already started digging through reviews. There are patterns, minority customers being treated differently, seated in poor locations, or outright ignored. Caleb sighed. Unfortunately, it's more common than most people realize. But if you're serious about this, we need to approach it strategically. Start with formal documentation. That email to the owner was a good move. Keep records of everything: dates, conversations, receipts. The more evidence you have, the stronger your case. Rachel nodded, even though he couldn't see her. What about legal action? It's an option, Caleb said carefully, but I'd recommend exhausting internal remedies first. If the owner is reasonable, they might take corrective action without needing to escalate. Rachel exhaled deeply. All right. Thanks, Caleb. I'll keep you updated. The rest of the day was a blur of research and calls. Rachel scrolled through online review sites, finding story after story that mirrored her own experience. A black couple wrote about being denied a window seat despite seeing empty tables. An Asian family described receiving subpar service during a birthday dinner. A Latina woman recounted how the manager seemed too busy to address her concerns but made time for white patrons. Rachel's stomach churned as the pieces came together. This wasn't about one bad manager. It was a culture of exclusion disguised as ambience. By mid-afternoon, she had compiled a list of reviews, complete with timestamps and screenshots. She couldn't shake the feeling that these stories were just the tip of the iceberg. Later that evening, Rachel sat in a cozy corner of her favorite coffee shop, sipping on a chai latte as she composed a second email. This one was more formal, a follow-up to ensure Evelyn Hart couldn't ignore her concerns. Subject: follow-up. Concerns about discrimination at the Meridian. Dear Ms. Hart, I wanted to follow up on the email I sent regarding my experience at your restaurant last night. After further research, I've discovered that my experience aligns with a troubling pattern noted by other customers. I've attached examples of reviews that highlight similar issues. It's clear that this is not an isolated incident. I strongly urge you to investigate these claims and take corrective action to ensure all patrons feel welcome at your establishment. I would appreciate a response regarding how you plan to address this matter. Thank you for your attention. Sincerely, Rachel Summers. She clicked send and leaned back, the weight of her decision settling over her. Confronting an issue like this felt daunting, but Rachel knew it was necessary. The response came the next morning. Her phone buzzed with an incoming email, and Rachel's pulse quickened as she opened it. Subject: follow-up. Concerns about discrimination at the Meridian. Dear Ms. Summers, thank you for bringing this matter to my attention. I take these concerns very seriously and would like to discuss them further. Please let me know a time that works for you to meet in person. Sincerely, Evelyn Hart. Owner, the Meridian. Rachel stared at the screen. The tone was polite, but there was no admission of fault, no acknowledgement of the deeper issue. Still, a meeting was a start. The following afternoon, Rachel arrived at the Meridian for her scheduled meeting. The atmosphere felt different during the daylight hours, quieter and less bustling. Evelyn Hart greeted her at the entrance, a tall, striking woman in her late 50s with sharp features and an air of authority. Ms. Summers, Evelyn said, extending a hand. Thank you for coming. Thank you for meeting with me, Rachel replied, shaking her hand firmly. They sat in a small, private dining room. Evelyn's posture was poised, but her eyes betrayed a hint of wariness. I've reviewed your emails and the reviews you included. I want to assure you that we take these allegations seriously. Rachel leaned forward. I appreciate that, but this isn't just about allegations. It's about a pattern that's harming your customers and your reputation. Evelyn's lips tightened. I've known Grant Donovan for years. He's a dedicated manager, and I find it hard to believe he would deliberately discriminate against anyone. Intent doesn't negate impact, Rachel said calmly. Whether he means to or not, his actions are creating a hostile environment for certain patrons. Evelyn hesitated. I'll admit, the reviews you highlighted are concerning. I'll need time to investigate further. Rachel nodded, but sensed Evelyn's reluctance. I'm willing to give you that time, but only if it leads to meaningful change. Otherwise, I'll have no choice but to escalate. The room fell silent, tension thick in the air. Evelyn finally spoke, her voice softer. You have my word, Ms. Summers. I'll look into it. As Rachel left the meeting, she felt a mix of hope and frustration. Evelyn seemed open to listening, but the deep-rooted culture of exclusion at the Meridian wouldn't change with promises alone. Back at home, Rachel called Caleb to update him. She's promised to investigate, but I'm not sure how far she'll go. Caleb's voice was steady. Keep the pressure on. People like Evelyn often need to see how much is at stake before they act. Stay prepared. Rachel hung up, her resolve unshaken. She glanced at her notebook, filled with notes from her research. This wasn't just about her, or even the Meridian. It was about challenging a system that had gone unchallenged for too long. And Rachel Summers wasn't backing down. Rachel sat at her desk, reviewing the folder of notes and screenshots she had compiled over the last week. Her research into the Meridian revealed a troubling pattern. Dozens of reviews, interviews, and casual conversations all pointed to the same conclusion. Discrimination wasn't an accident at this restaurant, it was a pattern. She leaned back in her chair, phone in hand. It was time to take the next step. Marcy? Rachel said when the line connected. Yes, who is this? My name is Rachel Summers, she began. I'm calling because I heard you used to work at the Meridian. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your time there, specifically about the treatment of customers. There was a long pause before Marcy responded. I'm not sure I should say anything. I don't want any trouble. Rachel softened her tone. I completely understand. But I'm trying to address something that I think hurt not only customers, but also employees like you. Whatever you share will stay confidential unless you agree otherwise. Marcy hesitated, then sighed. All right. What do you want to know? Rachel pressed record on her phone's app. Can you tell me about any instances where you noticed customers being treated unfairly or differently? Marcy's voice was quiet but steady. I saw it all the time. Mostly Black and Hispanic customers would be seated near the back or by the kitchen, even if there were better tables available. If they asked for a different table, Grant would say those were reserved, even when they weren't. Did anyone ever report this behavior? Rachel asked. We all knew it was wrong, but no one wanted to risk their jobs. A few people complained to Evelyn, but nothing ever changed. Marcy's account was just the beginning. Over the next few days, Rachel contacted more former employees and patrons. Each conversation painted the same picture. Charles and Simone, a Black couple, recounted a special anniversary dinner ruined when they were seated next to a loud service station, despite arriving early for their reservation. It felt like they didn't want us to be seen, Charles said bitterly. Mrs. Nguyen, a soft-spoken retired teacher, described being ignored for nearly 20 minutes before a waiter acknowledged her. I felt invisible, she admitted. Rachel's folder grew thicker with each interview. The testimonies didn't just point to poor management. They revealed a culture of exclusion perpetuated by Grant Donovan and tolerated by Evelyn Hart's hands-off approach. By the end of the week, Rachel had enough evidence to move forward. She met Caleb at his office, a cozy space adorned with legal books and family photos. Caleb skimmed through the folder, his expression darkening with each page. This is compelling, he said finally. You've uncovered a clear pattern of discriminatory practices. Rachel nodded. But is it enough to force Evelyn to act? It might be, Caleb said, but we need to tread carefully. If she sees this as a personal attack, she might dig in her heels. We should approach her with the intention of collaboration, not confrontation. I don't want to destroy her business, Rachel said firmly. I want it to be better. For everyone. Caleb smiled. Then let's draft a formal letter. We'll present your findings and give her a clear path to address the problem. The letter was thorough yet measured. It outlined the accounts Rachel had gathered, highlighted the impact of the discriminatory practices on patrons and employees, and proposed actionable steps. Immediate suspension of Grant Donovan pending investigation. Implementation of anti-bias training for all staff. Establishment of a clear policy to ensure fair treatment of all customers. They sent the letter with a deadline for response, giving Evelyn a week to reply. Days passed, and Rachel's inbox remained silent. Frustration simmered as she waited, but she knew patience was critical. Finally, on the 5th day, Evelyn responded. Subject, response to findings. Dear Ms. Summers, I've received your letter and reviewed the materials you provided. While I cannot immediately confirm the accuracy of all allegations, I am deeply troubled by the concerns raised. I would like to meet with you and any relevant parties to discuss how we can address these issues. Please let me know your availability. Sincerely, Evelyn Hart. Rachel stared at the email. It wasn't an outright commitment to change, but it was a start. The meeting took place in the Meridian's private dining room. Rachel arrived early with Caleb, while Evelyn entered with Grant Donovan by her side. His presence set Rachel's nerves on edge. Thank you for meeting with us, Evelyn began. I've gone through the materials Ms. Summers shared, and I'm here to listen. Rachel nodded. I appreciate that, but listening isn't enough. Real changes need to happen here, starting with accountability. She turned her gaze to Grant. Your manager has fostered a culture of exclusion that harms both customers and staff. This isn't just a misunderstanding, it's systemic. Grant bristled. With all due respect, I've worked here for years. I've never intentionally discriminated against anyone. Rachel opened the folder and pulled out several testimonies. Explain these, then. Multiple people, including former staff, described consistent behavior from you, denying prime tables, delaying service, and making dismissive remarks. Are they all lying? Grant's face reddened, but he said nothing. Evelyn frowned. Grant, I need you to step out for a moment. What? He sputtered. Step out, she repeated firmly. Once Grant was gone, Evelyn leaned forward, her tone softer. Miss Summers, I want to make this right, but this is a lot to process. I need time to fully investigate. Rachel's voice was calm but resolute. Time is fine, but action is necessary. Start by putting Grant on leave. Show your customers and staff that you're serious. Evelyn hesitated, then nodded. Consider it done, and I'll begin implementing anti-bias training immediately. Rachel exchanged a glance with Caleb, who gave a small nod of approval. That's a good start, Rachel said, but I'll be watching closely to make sure these changes stick. Evelyn met her gaze, a flicker of determination in her eyes. I understand. Thank you for holding us accountable. As Rachel and Caleb left the Meridian, she felt a cautious sense of hope. This was only the beginning, but for the first time, it felt like progress was possible. The hum of conversation filled the Meridian's private dining room as the staff gathered for an emergency meeting. Waiters, kitchen staff, and hosts exchanged nervous glances, their curiosity piqued by the unusual summons. Evelyn Hart stood at the front, her expression grave, as she waited for everyone to settle. Rachel Summers sat quietly in the corner, her notebook resting on her lap. She had been invited to observe the meeting after her findings had convinced Evelyn to act. Next to her sat Caleb Monroe, offering silent but reassuring support. When the last murmurs died down, Evelyn cleared her throat. Thank you all for coming. I know this meeting is out of the ordinary, but what we need to discuss is urgent. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Evelyn continued, her tone steady. Recent concerns have been brought to my attention regarding the way some of our patrons and staff have been treated. Specifically, there are allegations of unfair treatment based on race and ethnicity. The room fell silent. A few employees exchanged uneasy glances. Others stared at Evelyn, their faces etched with confusion or skepticism. I want to be clear, Evelyn said, her voice firm. This behavior, if true, is unacceptable and has no place at the Meridian. Our mission has always been to provide a welcoming and inclusive environment, and I take full responsibility for ensuring that happens. Grant Donovan stood near the back of the room, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His face was a mask of irritation, his jaw set in defiance. Excuse me, Grant interjected, his voice cutting through the silence. Are you implying that I or anyone else here has been discriminating against customers? Because that's simply not true. Evelyn turned toward him, her expression unreadable. Grant, this isn't an accusation. It's an opportunity to address the concerns raised and ensure we're doing everything right. Grant scoffed. Concerns? Or baseless allegations? I've run this restaurant for years. I know how to maintain the standard of excellence our clientele expects. Rachel finally spoke, her voice calm but resolute. And by standard of excellence, you mean excluding people who don't look like your usual patrons? Heads turned toward her as she stood, her notebook in hand. I've spoken to customers, current staff, and former employees. Their stories paint a consistent picture, Black and minority patrons being seated near the kitchen, denied better tables, or outright ignored. Staff being pressured to prioritize white customers. This isn't an isolated incident, Mr. Donovan. It's a pattern, and you've been at the center of it. Grant's face flushed with anger. This is absurd. You're making me out to be some kind of villain when I've only been doing my job. Your job, Rachel replied sharply, is to treat every customer with respect. Instead, you've created an environment where discrimination is normalized and overlooked. I don't have to stand here and listen to this, Grant snapped, stepping forward. Evelyn raised her hand. Grant, enough? Grant froze, his indignation momentarily stifled. Evelyn's tone softened as she addressed the staff. I want to hear from all of you. If anyone has experienced or witnessed behavior like what Ms. Summers described, I encourage you to speak up now. A heavy silence settled over the room. Then, hesitantly, a young hostess named Maria raised her hand. I don't want to cause trouble, she began, her voice trembling slightly, but I've noticed some things. Sometimes, Grant would tell us to seat certain customers in less desirable areas. He'd say it was to maintain the ambience, but it always seemed to be minorities who got those tables. Grant shot her a glare, but she avoided his gaze, continuing, I didn't know what to do. He's the manager, and I didn't want to lose my job. Encouraged by Maria's courage, another employee spoke up. Jackson, a senior waiter, nodded. She's right. I've seen it too. Grant has a way of making it clear who he thinks belongs here and who doesn't, without saying it outright. The murmurs grew louder as more employees began to chime in, their stories overlapping. Grant's composure began to crack. This is a witch hunt, he spat. You're all turning against me based on hearsay. Rachel stepped forward. It's not hearsay, Grant. It's accountability. She turned to Evelyn. You asked for honesty. Here it is. Evelyn looked around the room, the weight of the testimonies settling heavily on her shoulders. Grant, she said softly but firmly, I think it's time for you to step outside. Grant opened his mouth to protest, but Evelyn's sharp glare silenced him. With a final huff, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Evelyn faced the staff once more. I want to thank those of you who spoke up today. It's not easy to confront these issues, but it's necessary if we want to move forward. She glanced at Rachel, her expression softening. Miss Summers, you've given us a lot to think about. I appreciate your patience and your commitment to making this place better. Rachel nodded. Acknowledgement is the first step. The next step is action. Evelyn turned back to the staff. Effective immediately, we'll be implementing changes to ensure fairness and inclusivity in every aspect of our operations. This includes anti-bias training, an anonymous reporting system, and a clear accountability structure for management. A ripple of relief and cautious optimism spread through the room. As the meeting adjourned, Caleb approached Rachel, his tone approving. You handled that well. Clear, concise, and impossible to ignore. Rachel gave a faint smile. It's a start, but there's still a long way to go. They watched as the staff dispersed, some visibly relieved, others still processing what had transpired. Evelyn lingered at the front, deep in thought. She's willing to change, Caleb said. That's more than you see in most cases. Let's hope she follows through, Rachel replied. Outside, the crisp evening air greeted them. Rachel took a deep breath, the weight of the day settling on her shoulders. This isn't just about one restaurant, she said quietly. It's about challenging a culture that's been allowed to thrive for too long. Caleb nodded. One battle at a time, Rachel. And today, you made a difference. Rachel smiled faintly, her resolve stronger than ever. Rachel stood outside the Meridian early one crisp morning, gazing at the building as sunlight reflected off its polished windows. It looked just as it always had, imposing yet inviting, with its elegant facade and understated charm. But Rachel knew that what lay beneath the surface was far from perfect. Today marked a critical moment. Evelyn Hart had committed to implementing changes, starting with the suspension of Grant Donovan and the first round of staff training. Rachel entered through the main doors, greeted by the soft hum of preparation as the staff readied for the day. A few employees glanced at her, some with curiosity, others with cautious smiles. Rachel knew she wasn't exactly popular among everyone here. Evelyn appeared from the back office, her sharp heels clicking against the tiled floor. She looked more composed than Rachel had expected, though a faint tension lingered in her expression. Miss Summers, Evelyn greeted, extending a hand. Thank you for coming. Of course, Rachel replied, shaking her hand. This is an important day for your staff and your business. Evelyn nodded, leading Rachel into the dining room, where tables had been cleared to make space for the training session. At the front stood a projector and a screen, and a woman in a crisp blazer was setting up slides. This is Dr. Lorraine Bishop, Evelyn explained. She's leading today's session on unconscious bias and workplace inclusion. Rachel nodded approvingly. She had read about Dr. Bishop, a well-respected diversity and equity consultant known for her direct but empathetic approach. As staff members filed in, the room grew quieter. There were nervous glances, whispered conversations, and the occasional eye roll. Rachel spotted Maria and Jackson from the earlier meeting, sitting together near the front. Both offered her small, encouraging nods. Dr. Bishop began with an introduction, her calm and authoritative voice commanding attention. Today is not about blame or shame, she said. It's about understanding the ways bias can show up in our actions, often without us realizing it, and learning how to do better. Rachel watched closely as Dr. Bishop guided the staff through exercises and discussions. Some employees engaged eagerly, sharing their thoughts and experiences, while others remained silent, their expressions skeptical or guarded. "I want everyone to think about this question," Dr. Bishop said. "What does it mean to create a truly welcoming environment? Not just for some people, but for everyone?" The room fell silent. Slowly, Maria raised her hand. "It means treating everyone equally," she said, her voice steady. "It means making sure no one feels like they're less important just because they look different." Dr. Bishop nodded. "Exactly. And that starts with awareness. Bias isn't always about intent, it's about impact. What we do, even unintentionally, affects how others experience the world." As the session continued, Rachel noticed subtle shifts in the room. Employees who had initially seemed defensive began to soften, nodding along or asking thoughtful questions. Evelyn sat in the back, her expression serious as she took notes. Toward the end of the session, Dr. Bishop introduced a role-playing exercise. Employees were paired off and given scenarios to act out, ranging from handling a difficult customer to addressing a colleague's inappropriate comment. Rachel couldn't help but notice the tension as Jackson was paired with a waiter who had been visibly loyal to Grant. Their scenario involved a hypothetical manager insisting on seating a minority family near the kitchen despite open tables elsewhere. "What's the big deal?" the waiter said, his tone defensive as he played the role of the manager. "They're still getting a table, aren't they?" Jackson, playing the employee, responded firmly. "It's about more than just seating them. It's about showing respect and treating them the same as anyone else. If we keep doing this, we're telling people they don't belong here." The room was quiet as Jackson's words hung in the air. Dr. Bishop stepped in. "And that's the heart of it. It's not about individual actions. It's about the message those actions send. What kind of environment do you want to create?" By the end of the training, there was a palpable shift among the staff. Some employees approached Rachel afterward, thanking her for pushing for change. Others avoided her, but Rachel could tell that even they were starting to reconsider their perspectives. Evelyn approached Rachel as the room emptied. "What did you think?" "It's a solid start," Rachel said, "but this can't be a one-time thing. Change takes time and consistency." Evelyn nodded. "I've already scheduled follow-up sessions with Dr. Bishop and set up an anonymous feedback system for employees and customers. I know this is just the beginning." Rachel's lips curved into a faint smile. "Good. Because if you're serious about making this place better, you need to stay committed, even when it's uncomfortable." Later that day, Rachel sat in a quiet cafe, reflecting on the morning's events. She sipped her tea, her thoughts swirling. The training session had been promising, but Rachel knew that cultural shifts didn't happen overnight. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen to see a message from Caleb. "Caleb, how'd it go? Progress?" Rachel typed back quickly. "Rachel, yes, but there's still a long road ahead." Moments later, Caleb replied. "Caleb, that's how it always starts. One step at a time. Proud of you." Rachel smiled, setting her phone down. His words were a reminder of why she had started this journey. That evening, Rachel received an unexpected email. Subject: an apology. "Dear Ms. Summers, I wanted to personally apologize for my behavior and the harm it caused. I've spent the past week reflecting, and I realize now that my actions hurt people in ways I didn't fully understand. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to say that I am sorry. Sincerely, Grant Donovan." Rachel stared at the email, her emotions mixed. She wasn't sure if Grant's apology was genuine or an attempt to salvage his reputation, but it was a step she hadn't expected. After a moment's thought, she replied briefly. "Rachel, acknowledging your actions is a start. The real work lies in what you choose to do next." She hit send, feeling a flicker of hope. Change was slow, messy, and often uncomfortable, but it was possible. As Rachel prepared for bed that night, she thought about the day's progress. The fire that had ignited within her weeks ago still burned strong, and for the first time, she felt like it was starting to spread, lighting the way for others to see the possibility of something better. 6 weeks after the initial training, the Meridian was a restaurant in transition. Change wasn't instant, but it was visible. The once exclusive dining establishment was evolving into a place that embraced inclusivity. Rachel sat at her desk at home, reviewing updates Evelyn had sent her. The document outlined the steps the restaurant was taking: ongoing staff training, the establishment of an anonymous reporting system, and clear policies to address discrimination. It also detailed Evelyn's new hiring initiative aimed at diversifying the team. Her phone buzzed, breaking her focus. It was Evelyn. "Hi, Evelyn," Rachel answered, leaning back in her chair. "Hi, Rachel," Evelyn said, her tone a mix of exhaustion and determination. "I wanted to let you know we've finalized plans for the community forum. It's happening next Saturday. I'd love for you to be there." Rachel paused. A community forum was a bold step, opening the restaurant to public feedback and accountability. It was also risky. "I'll be there," Rachel said after a moment. "It's an important step." Evelyn exhaled audibly. "Thank you. Your presence will mean a lot to me and the community." The following Saturday, Rachel walked into the Meridian, now rearranged to accommodate the forum. Rows of chairs filled the dining area, and a small stage with a podium stood at the front. The space buzzed with quiet energy as staff members and community members arrived. Rachel spotted Caleb among the attendees and waved. He joined her, his expression thoughtful. "This is ambitious," Caleb remarked, surveying the room. "It's not every day a business owner invites public criticism." "Evelyn knows it's necessary," Rachel replied, "but it's still a gamble. Let's hope it pays off." The forum began with Evelyn stepping to the podium, her posture confident but her voice tinged with vulnerability. "Good evening, everyone," she began. "Thank you for coming. Tonight, we're here to listen, to hear from the community about how we can do better." She paused, scanning the room. "This restaurant has made mistakes, and for that, I take full responsibility. But acknowledging those mistakes is only the first step. The real work lies in making sure they don't happen again." Evelyn gestured toward Rachel, seated near the front. "I want to thank Ms. Rachel Summers for her courage in bringing these issues to light. Without her, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Polite applause followed, and Rachel felt a mix of pride and pressure. As the microphone was passed around, attendees shared their experiences. Some praised the restaurant for its efforts to change, while others recounted painful stories of feeling excluded. A young black couple spoke about a past anniversary dinner that left them feeling unwelcome. "We haven't been back since," the woman said, "but hearing about the changes you're making gives us hope." A former staff member shared their struggles working under Grant Donovan. "It felt like you couldn't speak up without risking your job," they said. "But now, I see things improving, and that gives me hope for the people still working here." Not all comments were positive. A few longtime patrons expressed skepticism, questioning whether the changes would last. Evelyn listened intently, taking notes and responding thoughtfully. Rachel admired her composure and willingness to face criticism head-on. After the forum ended, Rachel and Caleb stayed behind to talk with Evelyn. "I think that went as well as it could have," Caleb said. "You handled yourself well, Evelyn." "Thank you," Evelyn replied, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "It's not easy hearing criticism, but it's necessary. I want this restaurant to be a place where everyone feels welcome." Rachel nodded. "That's a good vision. Now the challenge is making sure you follow through." "I will," Evelyn said with quiet conviction. "This isn't just about saving my business. It's about doing what's right." Over the next few weeks, the restaurant continued its transformation. Rachel visited frequently, both as a customer and a consultant, observing the changes firsthand. The staff seemed more confident and engaged. Hosts greeted every customer warmly, regardless of appearance, and seating arrangements were clearly fair and balanced. The once tense atmosphere among employees had softened, replaced by a sense of camaraderie. Evelyn had also begun working with local organizations to support equity and inclusion initiatives. She hosted a fundraiser for a nonprofit that provided job training for underserved communities, donating a portion of the restaurant's profits. Rachel sat at a corner table during the event, watching as Evelyn mingled with guests. Maria, now promoted to a lead hostess role, stopped by to chat. "Things feel different now," Maria said, her smile genuine. "It's not perfect, but it's better. We're all working together to make this place what it should be." Rachel returned her smile. That's what progress looks like, imperfect but meaningful. One evening, Rachel received a surprising text from Grant Donovan. Grant, I heard about the changes at the Meridian. I see now that I was wrong. Thank you for pushing for what's right. Rachel stared at the message, unsure how to feel. Grant's initial defensiveness had been infuriating, but this acknowledgement felt like progress, however small. She typed a short reply. Rachel, change is possible when people are willing to learn. As the months passed, the Meridian became a beacon of inclusivity in the community. Former customers who had sworn off the restaurant returned, impressed by the changes. New patrons flocked to the space, drawn by its reputation for fairness and excellent service. Evelyn invited Rachel to a celebratory dinner marking the 6-month anniversary of the restaurant's transformation. Seated at a prime table near the windows, Rachel looked around the room, noting the diversity of the patrons and staff. The once exclusionary atmosphere had been replaced with warmth and vibrancy. Evelyn raised her glass, addressing Rachel. To you, Rachel. Thank you for holding us accountable and showing us a better way. Rachel raised her glass in return. To progress and to making it last. That night, as Rachel left the Meridian, she felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't expected. The fight for justice was far from over, but this was a victory, a reminder that change was possible, even in the most entrenched systems. She walked into the cool night air, her resolve stronger than ever. There were more battles to fight, more stories to uncover, and more spaces to make welcoming. But for now, Rachel allowed herself a moment of peace, knowing she had made a difference. 6 months had passed since Rachel's first fateful evening at the Meridian. The restaurant had undergone a profound transformation, both in appearance and spirit. From the moment patrons entered, they could feel the difference. The once subtle undertone of exclusivity had been replaced with an open, welcoming atmosphere. Rachel pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped inside. A host greeted her with a warm smile, and the energy of the room buzzed with life. Diverse groups of patrons filled the tables. Families celebrating milestones, friends catching up, and couples enjoying romantic evenings. Good evening, Miss Summers, the host said. Your table is ready. Rachel followed him to a prime spot near the windows, her eyes scanning the bustling dining area. She saw Maria directing the flow of guests with confidence, her promotion to lead hostess evident in the way she carried herself. Nearby, Jackson managed a team of servers with the same calm authority he had shown during the training session months earlier. As Rachel sat, Evelyn approached, a genuine smile lighting her face. Rachel, Evelyn said, extending her hand, thank you for coming. It's wonderful to see you again. Rachel returned the smile. It's good to be here. The place looks amazing. They chatted briefly before Evelyn excused herself to attend to other guests. Rachel ordered her meal and took a moment to absorb the changes. It wasn't just the ambience that had shifted. It was the entire culture of the restaurant. Servers moved seamlessly between tables, their interactions with patrons professional and friendly. Each guest, regardless of race, age, or background, was treated with the same warmth and respect. It was the kind of environment Rachel had envisioned during her long fight for change. A group of Black professionals sat at a table near the center of the room, laughing and toasting each other. At another table, a multi-generational family enjoyed a lively dinner. No one seemed out of place or unwelcome. Rachel's food arrived, and as she ate, she felt a quiet sense of pride. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but seeing the results firsthand made it all worthwhile. Toward the end of her meal, Evelyn returned, this time with Maria in tow. Rachel, Evelyn began. I wanted Maria to join us for a moment. She's been instrumental in maintaining the changes we've implemented. Maria beamed. Thank you, Miss Summers. I can't tell you how much things have improved. It's like we're finally working together as a team. That's wonderful to hear, Rachel said sincerely. You've been a big part of that, Maria. I saw your potential from the start. Maria blushed slightly, but her smile didn't waver. It's been an honor to be part of this. I know there's still work to do, but I'm proud of where we're headed. Evelyn nodded. Maria's leadership has been inspiring. She's even suggested some additional community outreach events that we're planning to launch soon. That's fantastic, Rachel said, her voice warm. This place is becoming more than just a restaurant. It's a part of the community. As the evening continued, Rachel watched as Evelyn moved from table to table, engaging with patrons and staff alike. This wasn't the detached owner Rachel had met months ago. This was a leader who had embraced accountability and change. At one point, a young couple approached Rachel's table. "Excuse me," the woman said shyly. "Are you Rachel Summers?" "Yes," Rachel replied, curious. "We just wanted to thank you," the man said. "We heard about what you did here, and it's incredible. We stopped coming to the Meridian years ago because we didn't feel welcome. But tonight, it feels completely different." Rachel's heart swelled. "Thank you for sharing that. It means a lot to me, and to everyone who worked hard to make this happen." They exchanged a few more words before the couple returned to their table. Rachel sat back, their gratitude fueling her sense of purpose. As the night wound down, Evelyn joined Rachel for dessert. "I've been meaning to tell you," Evelyn said, sipping her coffee. "I've partnered with a local nonprofit to support equity and inclusion initiatives. A portion of our profits will go toward funding job training programs and scholarships." "That's incredible," Rachel said, genuinely impressed. "It's a perfect way to give back." Evelyn nodded thoughtfully. "This journey has been humbling, Rachel. I've learned so much, not just about the restaurant, but about myself. I owe a lot of that to you." "You owe it to yourself," Rachel replied. "You made the choice to do better, even when it was hard. That's what matters." After finishing her dessert, Rachel stood to leave. Evelyn walked her to the door, and they paused just outside. "I hope you'll keep visiting," Evelyn said. "You'll always have a place here." "Thank you," Rachel replied, her voice filled with emotion. "I'll be back. This is just the beginning." As she walked to her car, Rachel felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The Meridian was thriving, not just as a business, but as a symbol of what was possible when people chose to confront their mistakes and build something better. The road to change was never easy, but tonight had proven that it was worth every step. The evening sky was a soft blend of pink and orange as Rachel pulled into the parking lot of the Meridian for a special event. It had been nearly a year since her first visit, and tonight the restaurant was hosting a celebration of its transformation, an evening dedicated to community, progress, and inclusivity. Rachel stepped out of her car, adjusting the blazer she had chosen for the occasion. The sound of music and laughter floated through the open doors, a testament to how far the restaurant had come. She paused for a moment, taking in the vibrant scene before heading inside. The dining room had been transformed into a lively gathering space. Tables were pushed to the edges of the room, leaving an open area where guests mingled freely. A live jazz band played softly in the corner, and servers moved gracefully among the crowd, offering trays of hors d'oeuvres and drinks. Evelyn Hart spotted Rachel almost immediately and made her way over, a wide smile on her face. "Rachel," Evelyn greeted, embracing her warmly. "I'm so glad you're here." "I wouldn't miss it," Rachel replied. "This is incredible." Evelyn gestured to the bustling room. "None of this would have been possible without you. This place has become everything I always hoped it could be, and more." Rachel smiled, but her voice was modest. "It was a team effort, Evelyn. You took the hard steps to make it happen." As they chatted, Maria approached, her excitement evident. "Miss Summers," Maria said, "I wanted to let you know. I've been promoted to assistant manager." "That's fantastic," Rachel exclaimed. "Congratulations, Maria. You've earned it." Maria nodded, her eyes shining. "Thank you. And thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. You've inspired all of us." Rachel felt a lump in her throat. "You inspire me, Maria. Seeing you step into leadership is proof that change is real and lasting." Later that evening, Evelyn took the stage to address the crowd. The band paused, and the room quieted as she began to speak. "Good evening, everyone," Evelyn said, her voice carrying warmth and sincerity. "Tonight, we celebrate not just the transformation of this restaurant, but the strength of a community coming together to create something better." She paused, scanning the room. A year ago, the Meridian was not the place it should have been. It was exclusive in ways it shouldn't have been, and I take full responsibility for that. But thanks to the courage and determination of people like Rachel Summers, we were given the chance to do better. Evelyn gestured toward Rachel, who felt a wave of emotion as the crowd turned to look at her, applauding warmly. This journey wasn't easy, Evelyn continued, but it was worth it. And tonight, I'm proud to announce that we're taking our mission even further. Starting this year, the Meridian will host monthly community dinners to bring people from all walks of life together. We'll also continue our partnership with local nonprofits to support equity and inclusion initiatives. The applause grew louder, and Rachel couldn't help but smile. After the speech, Caleb found Rachel near the dessert table, a glass of wine in hand. "You should be proud," Caleb said, clinking his glass against hers. "I am," Rachel replied, her voice thoughtful. "But more than that, I'm hopeful. This place feels different now, and I think it's inspiring others." Caleb nodded. "You've set an example. And not just for the Meridian, for other businesses too." Rachel chuckled softly. "Funny you say that. I've been getting calls from other restaurant owners asking for advice. It's overwhelming, but it feels good to see people wanting to change. Have you thought about making it official?" Caleb asked. "Consulting, I mean?" Rachel hesitated. The idea had been swirling in her mind for months, but she hadn't made a decision. "Maybe," she said finally. "I want to make sure I'm ready. Change is slow, and it takes a lot out of you." "It's worth it, though," Caleb said. Rachel smiled. "It always is." The evening continued with laughter and stories, the room filled with a palpable sense of joy and connection. Rachel moved among the guests, speaking with patrons who shared how much the restaurant's transformation had meant to them. One older gentleman approached her, his eyes kind but serious. "You're Rachel Summers, aren't you?" "I am," she said, extending her hand. "My wife and I used to come here years ago," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "But we stopped because, well, we didn't feel welcome anymore. But tonight, it feels like home again." "Thank you for that." Rachel's chest tightened with emotion. "Thank you for coming back. That means more than I can say." As the night wound down, Rachel stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The cool air felt refreshing after the warmth of the crowded dining room. She leaned against the railing, looking out at the city lights. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from Evelyn. "Evelyn, thank you again, Rachel. Tonight was everything I hoped it would be. Let's keep making it better." Rachel typed a quick reply. "Rachel, we will. Together." The event ended, and Rachel drove home with a full heart. She thought about the journey, the frustration, the challenges, the hard conversations, and how it had all led to this moment. Sitting on her couch with a cup of tea, Rachel opened her laptop. She began drafting a plan for her next steps, consulting, mentoring, and continuing to push for change wherever it was needed. The fight for justice wasn't over, but tonight had proven that it was always worth it. Rachel smiled to herself, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. This was just the beginning.